Hi there, my name is Steve Gerhardt, and as always, this is the Unagi Observer. Thank you so much for stopping by and watching the video. I appreciate it, as always. So I actually have something to talk about this week. Originally, I was just going to do some filler video, but as I said last week, I actually got some things to talk about. So the first thing we're going to talk about is Perfect Blue, the Metamorphosis. Not the movie by Satoshi Kon, but the book that influenced the movie by Satoshi Kon. So yeah, we're going to talk about this for a little bit. Not very long, just kind of highlights. And then we're going to talk about Japanese booze. I work in a beer and wine store, so this is right up my alley. All right, so let's get started. So I am sure you are aware of Perfect Blue, which is an anime movie that came out a few years ago by Satoshi Kon. Now, you probably heard of that name. He's a very famous mangaka, I should say. He passed away way too young, way too soon. So yeah, he was a mangaka, but he was also a really good anime director and writer for anime movies. And one of his most well-known movies is, of course, Perfect Blue, which is about an idol transitioning from being an innocent idol going into acting and being an actress, and having to do that switch of going from purity to what you have to do as an actress sometimes, which is kind of be sexy and that kind of things. And it's kind of a commentary on the idol industry, so to speak, in Japan. So that was one of the things that Satoshi Kon was trying to get across. And his influence, what his inspiration was a light novel, almost by the same name, called Perfect Blue: Complete Metamorphosis. Okay. The guy who wrote this is, please forgive my Japanese, Yoshikazu Takeuchi. So not that different in terms of what he's trying to talk about, which is an idol who is very innocent, well thought of in that regard, and her fans, her super fans, who are just like, please don't change, Mima, please don't change, and how that can go into obsession, into murder, and things like that. So while the Satoshi Kon movie, and Satoshi Kon is known for doing like mind-bending things, what is reality, what is real, what is not, what is psychosis, what is sanity, those kinds of things. That's not so much in this. This is pretty straightforward. So the main character, Mima, is an idol, again transitioning. She is continuing her career because she's getting older, and she knows that if she doesn't make the transition, then things are going to die out, and she really doesn't have a backup plan. So what she's trying to do is she's trying to make kind of redefining herself in the book, and to being kind of slowly moving away from being the very cute, pure, innocent idol into something more adult, not pornographic, but just saying, hey, I'm a grown woman and this is the direction I'm heading in. So of course, one of her fans, a super fan, doesn't like it, and he wants her to stay pure. So in his mind, he's just like, he's trying to stop her from doing this photo book where she's going to kind of wear some racy things. Again, she's not trying to be pornographic or slutty or anything like that. Just kind of sexy, right? And he doesn't want that. He wants Mima to be pure and innocent. And so he kind of goes into the depths of insanity, and it goes to the point where, of course, he kind of gets murderous. There is no guesswork as to what is real, what isn't. There's no guesswork as who the villain is in the movie, Satoshi Kon's movie. That is an issue, or not an issue, but a way that he tells the story. And by the way, I'm just kind of doing an overview of this. In the future, I'm going to do a more in-depth comparison between the book and the movie, because I think that deserves it. But I just wanted to talk a little bit about the book itself. Now, one of the things about this book that I'm going to tell you right now, this is not, I repeat, not for the kiddos, okay? You got to be an adult to read this one. The murders are, and the way that the murders are done, very graphic, and they throw you a gut punch in literally, like, was that 4 No, not even 4 pages, 2 pages. 2 pages in, you get a gut punch. That's all I'm going to say. And it's one of those things where you're just like, already? Already we're getting this violence? Already? And it doesn't even have anything to do with Mima, our heroine of the story. Is this a good book? I will tell you offhand that, yes, this is a good read. It's a quick read. The guy who wrote this did a pretty good job. He's written other stuff and he's actually done other things. But when I do the more in-depth version of this, I'll talk more about that. But this is different than the movie insofar that it's a pretty much straightforward, obsessive fan going way beyond the boundaries to keep Mima the same. Okay, so tough read. Good, but a tough read. All right. So in the future, I'll let you guys know when I'm going to do more in depth in this. Okay, so that's it for Perfect Blue Complete Metamorphosis by Yoshikazu Takeuchi. And you can actually get this as I did off of Amazon.com. So if you're interested, I'm not sure this is something your library might carry. I don't know. But if you're interested in this, you can definitely get it off of Amazon, and you can get a used copy like I did. So you don't have to pay a whole lot of money. So that is it for Perfect Blue, the book that inspired the movie. And we're going to go on to Japanese booze. Okay, Japanese booze. So let's talk about that. So a couple things first. First thing is that if you don't have the right permissions from YouTube, doing a tasting on camera can be a little tricky, and it might cause it to get a not copyright strike, but a strike against your account. So I'm not going to bother with doing a tasting, but I can still show you the bottles that I've tasted from. I've already done the tasting, and so I can go off my notes and show you guys what these wonderful things are. So for those of you who don't know, I work at what's called a hand sell store. Basically what that means is that I have a few hundred different bottles of wine, spirits, and beer that are higher end. Not a sommelier, so it's not like we have $5,000 bottles of wine, but I do have $1,500 to $2,000 bottles that come in and out of the store from time to time. Like, for example, the other day we sold a $500 bottle of Portuguese port. So the idea of hand sale is that I kind of have to be able to speak to almost everything in the store, which means that I taste everything in the store, and I also taste everything that the vendors want me to sell. And I taste and I choose what do I want to bring into the store, buy, and then, of course, retail it to you guys. So that's basically my job in a nutshell. I'm very, very much oversimplifying it, but basically that's what it is. So a coworker, Richard, who is a humongous Japanese baseball fan, like that's his thing. He loves going to Japan every year and doing stadium tours. He's sometimes part of a tour group. Sometimes he meets up with his Japanese friends and they go on and they see a number of games and see what they can do and have dinners and things like that. And he just has a ball. And this year he went, and when he went there, he kind of said something to the effect that he had come into the store, and I think I was on vacation, and he covered basically my time at the store. And they said, "Oh, you okay? Well, let's show you some of our wines." And so here you go. And he thought it was kind of interesting because some of the wines were, from nice stores, some of them were from convenience stores, and so from the whole gamut. Now, for those of you who are wondering why that's such a big deal, is that because in some states, like here in Maryland, you have to have a very special reason, dispensation from the state. You have to pay for an extraordinarily expensive license to be able to sell in places like a grocery store, a gas station, a convenience store. Actually, I don't think there's any convenience stores in the state of Maryland that do that. That's just for the state. Each state has its own laws. So there you go. So anyway, it's a big deal. So Richard was able to bring back some of these wines and beers and things like that. And I'm going to show you today 3 very, very interesting bottles of Japanese booze and some information behind them. And my hope is that I will be able to bring some of these into my store and be able to sell them. Sometimes that can be an easy thing, sometimes that can be a difficult thing. I'm kind of thinking this might be a hard thing. So keep your fingers crossed, maybe I can get these things in and maybe I can sell to you. Who knows? Maybe. But you have to be 21 or and over. Nobody is sponsoring this video, by the way. Just let's make that clear. Nobody's sponsoring this. This is just me showing you stuff. Okay, so let's get into it. Let's take a look at some Japanese booze. Okay, before we start with the first bottle, I just want to make sure that we're clear. I'm not talking about sake. Sake is its own kind of alcohol. It's not a wine, it's not a spirit, it's not a beer, but it has elements of all those things in it when they make it. And I can talk about that in another video if you would like. Let me know down below. So we're talking literally about non-sake items. And so the first one we're going to talk about is from Hitomi Winery. It's called Chardonnay Girl. Sorry, I don't know if you can see that. Pretty neat little label there. I believe, I don't know Japanese. If you know Japanese, let me know if that is actually kanji for Chardonnay. I have no idea. Anyway, kind of want to show you this. So this is a very interesting wine. It is a Chardonnay, and but it doesn't taste like one. So that's kind of what makes it unusual. And before I go more in depth into the Chardonnay Girl 2022 vintage is important. Let me talk about a little bit about wine, and kind of let you know that wine tastes different from place to place to place. And there's a word for it. It's a French word called terroir. If I'm mispronouncing that, I apologize. But terroir is kind of like an all-encompassing word. It's basically a statement of saying, here's a region that you grow wine in, and everything that goes into growing that wine. So what is the soil like? What is the weather like? Is there literally a breeze coming off the ocean, off of a lake? Is it near a volcano? Is it, again, what kind of soil does it have? Is it hot? Is it a cooler region? Does it have a microclimate? Yes, these are all things that factor into growing grapes and wine. Now, the interesting thing about Japan is that Japan has its own grapes, okay? So they do have their own grapes, but they're not really conducive to winemaking, and there are straight up Japanese grapes made into Japanese wine. We don't really see that here in America, and as a matter of fact, even in Japan, you don't really see it that much. So what happens is that they take clippings from vineyards around the world, and they try to figure out what terroir in Japan is good for those vines. Chardonnay seems to do okay there. Kind of depends on what part of Japan that you put it in. Japan is not really conducive to a lot of foreign grapes, so that's why this is kind of neat in that someone was able to take a Chardonnay vine from I believe it was France, and was able to grow it in Japan. That's a tricky thing. It's not as easy as it sounds. So they've made this Chardonnay Girl 2020 vintage 2022, and it has a wonderful nose of hay, straw and hay, kind of what we call barnyard. We don't mean like animals pooping, but kind of like have that pleasant barnyard smell when you come onto a farm. You get that smell. That's actually a good thing. But like I said, when we tasted it, it didn't really seem like it tasted like an actual Chardonnay. Chardonnays can be buttery. They take in wood from oak wood from the barrels fairly easily, so you can change the taste like that. And it's just and it can be dry, very dry. This wine was not that dry. Like I said, a really nice barnyard smell and on the nose, and but when we tasted it, it didn't taste anything like a Chardonnay. If anything, this is actually tastes almost like a Sauvignon Blanc, which means that there's a little bit of fruit in this. Now, you can't quite see it because of the camera quality, but this is actually pretty hazy. You should be able to see my face through the bottle a lot more clearly than that. And that's important because what that means is that it's unfiltered. So if you have a wine that's unfiltered, basically what they're saying is that, okay, we're not trying to impact the natural fermentation as much as possible. So it goes through a fermentation like this in French oak. Now, they don't tell me how long it is based on that taste and based on what oak I can get out of it. It's probably no more than a couple years. The longer it stays in there, the more characteristics of the wood that you get into the wine. So this is really unusual. Now, the other part of this is that it is actually a double fermentation. So they do the fermentation inside the barrel, but then they do it inside the bottle. All right, so that means that a certain thing happens, and when there's a secondary fermentation purposely in here, what that means is that this bottle has to be kept cold at all times. Now, when I say cold, I don't mean like freezing cold. If you have like a nice cellar, you can put it down there, that's fine. Put it in the fridge, but don't put it in the freezer. That's just a bad idea. And the reason for that is because the fermentation is still active somewhat, a cold temperature suspends that fermentation. If it doesn't, if it's like kept in a warm place, this cork is just going to shoot right on out because it's going to cause a fermentation, which causes bubble, causes the CO2 buildup, and it's just going to pop this cork right out of it. So that's kind of fun and unique to know about this. So is this good? Do you want to drink wine? You want a Japanese wine? This is really nice. Now, when I say Japanese, I mean because it's made in Japan. The vineyard itself, the vines themselves, like I said, I believe come from actually France. So yes, Hitomi Winery. Good stuff. We're going to try and get this one into our stores as well. Probably retail it around $21, $22 a bottle. Just getting to give you an idea. So if you want to go online, see if you can find it for yourself, go for it. Obey the laws of your state. Some states will let you order it from out of the country and bring it in. Some don't, like Maryland. We can't. But maybe you live in a state that does. So if you want to check it out, give it a try. Okay, this next one is a fun one. It's from Cumania Wines. It's a fun label. It's a white bear on this bottle. It's a 500 milliliter bottle, so it's slightly less than what you would normally get in a bottle of wine. Can you see that? All right. So here's the interesting thing of this. When I tasted this, the screw top cap, by the way. When I tasted this, our initial reaction was that this was a mead. We're like, okay, this is mead. Now, wait a minute. We got a little bit of sourness there that a mead doesn't have. So we were really confused by this. It says, honey wine on here. Now, in America, honey wine is another name for mead. It's actually not wine. Mead is kind of brewed, but you use honey. You use a lot of honey. This, much to my surprise, when I was able to track it down and the website down and actually take a look at it a little bit, this actually is a wine with honey in it. That is not, in spirits, that is not unusual to do. For example, Bar Hill Gin and Vodkas will infuse honey that they grow on site into their spirits, and you can kind of taste a little bit of it. Now this, because it tasted like mead so much until we got the sour notes on the aftertaste, we kind of understand that this is not infused. So what this is that the grapes are what's called Japanese Delaware. Now, Delaware grapes come from the east coast of the United States. So yes, on the East Coast, we can actually make wine, and we can make some good wine. One of the hardier vines that we have on the East Coast is called Delaware. It's usually in the Delaware, New Jersey, Pennsylvania coastal regions. So you can find those grapes, and they make a really nice kind of hardy. They're kind of light red, but when you ferment them, it comes out as a white wine. But it's very hardy, meaning that you can plant this thing just about anywhere. And it has a unique quality to it in that, and it's the same unique quality that all Native American vineyards vines have, which is we grow grapes that are resistant to phylloxera, which is what almost killed the wine industry in the 1800s. As a matter of fact, almost all wines worldwide actually have a percentage DNA coming from American vineyards because they weren't resistant to phylloxera and ours were. So we kind of did this cut and paste, so to speak, in the early 1900s, and that kind of saved the wine industry. So in Japan, what they did is they got some clippings of the Delaware grape, and they call it Japanese Delaware because it's taking to the terroir pretty well. They don't have that much of a problem growing it. It's pretty good with most different types of temperatures. It needs a little bit more of an arid climate than a wet climate, but that's okay. It can still do that. So you have a white wine. So this is definitely a white wine. And again, the grape is Delaware, Japanese Delaware. Now what they did here is they fermented the wine first. So they crushed the grapes, they put it into a steel tank, and they let it ferment so that it becomes wine, right, through that process. And then what they do is they kind of take it back out, and then they take honey, which apparently is from Hokkaido, and I would really like to get some honey from Hokkaido because what I was tasting here is not something I've had before. I mean, you can identify it as honey, but nothing that you've tasted here in America. So I'm gonna probably get spend some money and bring in some Hokkaido honey. So anyway, they used honey from Hokkaido, and they did a second fermentation and they steal that. Now remember how I talked about in the first bottle of wine, they did it inside the bottle of wine. They didn't do that here. They did it. They went back to the steel vat and they reincorporated the actual honey into the wine. It's not infused like it is in a distilling product. So this is very sweet, very honey sweet, but it has that nice little like wine sourness underneath it. And it's just a wonderful dessert wine. So what do I mean by a dessert wine? This is something that you serve after dinner. It's like little cups. It's not a whole lot, hence the size of the bottle. And it is just so, once it's chilled, it's such a treat. So Kira, who has just, Ginger Gaiden, if you know her channel, she has just moved to Hokkaido. So Ginger, Kira, if you happen to see this bottle out there, please give it a try and let us know what you think. All right, or anyone else for that matter. This is something that we think that we can actually find in America and bring it in, and hopefully it won't be that difficult to do. So yes, Cumania wines, honey from Hokkaido, Japanese Delaware grapes, a wonderful, wonderful dessert wine. Try it, you'll like it. All right, this last one is really something. It's called Kiuchi Yuzu wine. Now, here's the interesting thing. It's not actually a wine; it's a spirit. It's and because of the way that it's made. While it is going through a fermentation process and while the ABV is pretty low on it, it is actually technically a spirit. But because of taxation issues here in America, it is called a wine, even though it isn't. It's kind of like sake. Sake is not a wine, but it's sometimes referred to as a wine. So here we go. Here it is. Oh, by the way, I'm putting the links to all the websites for all these wines down below. So if you're curious, go ahead and click on those links and hit the translate button. But yes, yuzu wine. So for those of you who don't know what yuzu is, it's a very interesting citrus fruit. It has all these layered taste to it: mandarin orange, lemon, lime, just all these different things in there. Over the centuries, yuzu has been used as a kind of like a medicinal thing to help people with colds and things like that. Obviously, because of the probably nutritional value of the yuzu fruit itself. It can be found in abundance in Japan. You can find it in Tibet and China, a little bit in China and Tibet. But really what this is that it's, again, it goes through a 2-step fermentation process. Okay, so the first one is basically they just take the yuzu, crush it, put everything together, and let it ferment. The secondary fermentation is you take that juice. So you don't just take... So the first part of it is kind of like wine, where you kind of crush and mush everything together. It's called a must. And same thing with the yuzu. You crush it, mush it, make a must out of it. And then you let it ferment, so the juice ferments. And so that's kind of where the alcohol comes in. And the alcohol is... for those of you who are curious, the fermentation process is a chemical process. There's a lot of science behind wine and spirits, to be honest. So basically, you're talking about chemical compounds and breaking down sugars and starches and things like that. So the initial fermentation is to create the alcohol. But you still have that taste, that really strong yuzu taste, right? So the secondary fermentation, again, this is not in bottle like the very first wine. So this is the first time it's done, again, in a steel vat. And then the second time, they just take the juice only, not the rest of it, no, what's called the must, and takes the juice and they put in starch, and they do a secondary fermentation. And that's kind of what kind of evens it out. It gives it a little bit of sweetness. It changes the chemical composition of the juice a little bit, and also drives down the alcohol. So a lot of alcohol is being eaten up in this chemical process. So you have this wonderfully tasting, bright, very refreshing. There's no bubbles in this. I mean, if this had bubbles, man, this would sell like hotcakes in America. But it is just a very, very, very good. Just, you want citrus, you want a little alcohol in there. It's about 10%. Here you go. It's not going to get you drunk right away. You can drink. You can probably drink this whole bottle with a friend and be pleasantly buzzed, but not sloppy drunk or anything like that. Now, this is definitely a sushi wine. Yes, a sushi. Put this with sushi. And because it's got that citrusy, goes well with like the mangoes, with the fish and stuff like that. Like, I can just see eating a fatty tuna nigiri and having a little cup of this. This is something else. So this is really technically a spirit, but it'll be sold as a wine when we find it here in America. And here's the thing, is that we've actually found this being sold in America, and actually in Maryland in a couple places. And the reason why we were able to do that is that for you beer geeks out there, Hitachino Brewery, you know that one in Japan, where they sell like a 4-pack of like the White Owl beer for like, ungodly amount. The people that own Hitachino also own this. So we think we might have success in bringing this guy into the store. Again, all the websites are going to be down below, so if you want to check out on the website, I think you can get this on through Amazon if your state lets you. Follow the law, don't get in trouble, and definitely make sure you pay the taxes on that stuff, because the feds don't joke on that. That's illegal if you don't pay the taxes on these things. But yes, this is wonderful. I cannot rave up much, even though it's very simple. There's not a whole lot to talk about. It just tastes so good. It's so wonderful. All right, so yes, there you go. It's a wonderful bottle to have, and hopefully I'll be able to get maybe a case of it. Who knows? Okay, so that's it for this week. Like I said, a book, Perfect Blue, that inspired Satoshi Kon to do his anime, Perfect Blue. Very violent book. You need to be an adult to read this. If you're a kid, this is not for you, not for the kiddos. But I'll do a deeper dive between this and the movie in a future episode of the Unagi Observer. I'll let you guys know when that's going to happen. And of course, we have all the booze. So hopefully that gave you some information for those of you who are 21 and over. Like I said, I'm going to have the links down below, and so you can check it out, see if you want it, see if you can get it on Amazon. I know a couple of these you can get on Amazon. Just make sure you follow the laws in your state, pay the taxes on them, don't get in trouble. But if you are over 21 and you would like to partake of these wines, I heartily encourage you to do so. And I'll let you know if I actually can get it into my store. Wouldn't that be awesome? Okay, so that's going to be it for this week. Thank you so much for watching and hanging on this long. And yeah, so that's going to be it. So Anime USA is coming up, and I'm going to be doing 3 panels there. I'll have a schedule down below. It might change. If it does, I'll let you know. And yeah, so stay healthy, be good, love you guys, and maybe I'll see you at the convention, but I will certainly see you next week. And as always, watch more anime.